What if I told you that after reviewing 1,000 plus agency offers, I discovered that most agencies are structuring their offers completely wrong? Here are the 7 critical lessons I wish every agency owner knew. Now, make sure you stick around for lesson number 7 because it's the exact opposite of what most agency coaches and gurus are teaching right now. But before I get into the lessons, let me answer why I even care about agency offers in the first place. I'm not just talking about agency offers because every successful agency I know has completely transformed their business by getting their offer right. I'm not doing this because agencies in our programs have seen their close rates jump from 30 to over 60% just by restructuring their offers. I'm not doing this because our clients constantly generate 30 to 50K plus months with smaller teams and less complexity. And I'm not just doing this because the agencies that implement these lessons are finally able to take Fridays off while actually increasing their profits. The real reason I care about and want to talk about offers today is actually a lot bigger. I believe that the traditional agency model is fundamentally broken. It's creating burned out founders who are trapped by the very business that they've built with the intention of creating freedom. And we're actually seeing it everywhere. Most of the agencies that come to us are working 80+ hour work weeks. They're missing their children's events and they feel like they can never even step away from their business. But here's what's fascinating. When you look at most of the successful agencies and the consultants that are out there, the ones with happy founders, the ones with healthy profits and sustainable growth, they all have one thing in common. They've completely reimagined how they structure and sell their services. They're not following the old playbook of custom and bespoke services, endless retainers, and trying to be everything to everyone. Instead, they've discovered what I'm about to share with you: 7 critical lessons that completely transform how you're going to package, position, and deliver your services. So let's dive into the lessons. Lesson number 1, the outsourced department trap. Most agencies structure their offers and their services to essentially become an outsourced marketing department. And then they wonder why clients treat them like employees. Here's the thing. When you position yourself as a replacement for internal staff, you lose your valuable outsider perspective. You end up getting treated like an employee. You create a dependency that ends up being more difficult for you to scale your own business. You also limit your ability to charge premium rates because they're going to continue to ask themselves and say to themselves, well, I can get this cheaper if I just bring this in-house. So lesson number 1 is make sure you position yourself as a strategic advisor, not an outsourced employee. Your outsider perspective as an agency owner or consultant is your advantage. So don't sacrifice it for the illusion of security by convincing them that you're going to be an internal partner. Lesson number 2, the custom service and retainer myth. While customization and retainers seem super client focused, they create a ton of problems for you. They create longer sales cycles due to more complex scoping and back and forth of proposals. They create operational inefficiency and delivery headaches. You often front load your work, but so many agencies will spread out the payments, which hurts their cash flow. It adds this artificial complexity to justify an ongoing relationship. And lastly, scope creep eats into your fixed revenue. So all of these custom work just creates more scope creep. So lesson number 2 is standardize your core offering and don't force everything into a custom retainer. Sometimes a well-structured project will create more value for both you and the client because it's going to be more profitable and really specific, probably easier to sell. Lesson number 3, the outcomes over deliverables principle. Most offers that I've reviewed focus heavily on the deliverables, the what you do, rather than the outcomes, what clients get. And I've watched this challenge so many owners because it makes it harder to justify the value that you're creating. It creates pressure to include more and more deliverables because they're just going to try to get everything on that list. It's going to make you shift focus from results to tasks. It really makes it easier for clients to start comparison shopping when you have a list of all the things that you're going to do versus what they're going to do. And lastly, it forces you to compete on price instead of value. So lesson number 3 is sell outcomes, not just a list of deliverables. Your clients aren't buying services. They are buying the result that those services create. Lesson number 4, the power of focused promises. There's a ton of beauty in starting a client engagement with smaller focused promises because the reality is that smaller and focused promises are much simpler and really they're much easier to sell because you're giving yourself a shorter sales cycle because it's a smaller promise. It's going to be easier to deliver because when you have that smaller promise, you're going to be able to offer a more clear scope of work. And because it's a more clear scope of work, it's going to be easier to scale because you're going to have a repeatable process to deliver said work. It's also going to be easier to measure because you're going to have clearer success metrics because you're doing fewer things, which ultimately allows you to package into more premium offers because they're going to value it more. Lesson number 4 is to make smaller, more focused promises that you can consistently over deliver on rather than these grandiose grandiose promises that create stress, complexity, and when your prospect looks at it, it just feels like work. Lesson number 5, the contract security paradox. Here's the thing. When I talk to most agency owners, they want long-term contracts. And long-term contracts often create a lot of false security. They create false security because clients in most cases can still leave early and get out of your contract, especially if they're a much larger company than you. You're probably not going to go through what it's going to take to even fight that. And it's going to take way too much energy that's going to take away from opportunities to get other business. Long-term commitments also create more scrutiny inside of your business. They're going to be looking at what's coming next. Why haven't we got certain things done, especially if things are slower than you expected? Here's the reality. All clients will eventually leave. There's longer term contracts oftentimes will create contract renewal anxiety that puts more pressure on you. And lastly, I see people that go to selling these large retainers and they end up discounting to secure the longer terms, but they end up being less profitable in the end because of that scope creep. Lesson 5 is build security through excellence in delivery and building a steady and repeatable pipeline, not through long-term contracts that may or may not create mutual resentment. I've seen so many agencies be in these long-term contracts that go south, but the client keeps asking for more because they want to follow the contract and it's with someone that you don't want to leave and you're afraid to lose them. And so you just let it play out. Lesson number 6, the client lifecycle truth. Here's the thing. Not all clients churning and not all clients leaving is a bad thing. In fact, you should have planned exits. When you anticipate a client leaving because you have a smaller, focused, finite project, you'll create urgency to get it done, which creates more focus. It's actually going to allow you to charge more, which allows for higher project fees and really higher profits at the end of the day. Usually when I see our clients shorten this up, they'll actually reduce their delivery fatigue. They'll create natural referral opportunities because they offer something specific. And it makes it easier to maintain that premium positioning because you've seen it before. Your clients ask you to do more and more things, and it gets really muddy as to what you actually do. So lesson number 6 is plan for successful endings. A clear exit strategy often leads to better results, stronger relationships, and endless engagements because they might be able to come back. Now, this actually brings us into one of the most important points because when I hear most agency owners get scared when I say create shorter engagements and not have these long retainers, they're like, well, how do I keep clients for a long period of time? That's what I want to introduce lesson number 7. Now, what are the common fears that agencies have when I tell them to lead with a shorter, more specific project versus jumping into an endless, super open custom retainer is, what if I want to keep clients for the long term? Well, first of all, not only do we talk about the insecurity and the fallacy of long-term contracts, but your first offer that you give your client doesn't need to solve every single one of their problems, which brings us to, I think, the most impactful lesson after reviewing 1,000 agency offers is that multiple income streams will give you an advantage. So like I said, most agencies rely solely on client services revenue, that the open-ended retainer for 6 or 12 months that turns into scope creep and you just doing more and more and more. And that creates constant pressure to, one, maintain that full client roster, creates pressure to handle any sort of feast or famine cycles because when you have these large retainers, usually it means you have concentration risk. It creates pressure because you don't scale through more clients. You scale through taking on more work from one client, making that one client worth a lot more to you. And at the end of the day, you're trading time for money. But after working with 800 plus agencies and consultancies, the modern agencies have discovered that monetizing their expertise, not just through labor, allows them to generate revenue from different types of buyers. We have the 3 different types of buyers we call clients, members, and customers. It allows them to create more predictable cash flow because when they go through the first offer, sometimes they'll hop into your next offer, which usually can have a recurring revenue stream component. It allows you to scale profits without scaling headcount because these additional income streams are built off of intellectual property that's up here, which is getting you paid for your thinking. Speaking of getting paid for your thinking, it's better because you're getting paid for your thinking. You have tons of expertise. It's not just your hands to keyboard. It's not just the work that you're doing. So you can have a bunch of customers and a bunch of members that don't take up much bandwidth as the clients where you're doing some labor for. You actually serve people at different price points, allows you to let clients and prospects try you out, lets you give them an audition to see if they're actually a good fit. And lastly, if you've been doing this for a while, it allows you to build something of real value, which is intellectual property. It is an asset and it can be sold. So for example, clients, they can get your higher level, one-on-one, more intimate services. But again, that's high effort, low volume. So those need to be worth it to you. I say minimum $30,000 to $50,000 a year for a client level. Then your members, they get your training, they get your coaching programs, they get your memberships. Those can range from $5,000 to $30,000. Customers get your workshops, your digital products, your templates ranging from $50 to $2,000. So lesson number 7 is don't limit yourself to just service revenue. Package your expertise into multiple offers. We recommend at least 3, and you can have them at different price points to align with those different types of buyers. And it's going to create more stability, scalability, and more leverage in your business. And here's what's fascinating. Many agency owners discover that some clients will end up purchasing all 3 types of offers, significantly increasing their lifetime value while reducing delivery complexity. One of our clients, Tim, he created an 8-week program that was $3,500. And it was very structured. There were boundaries on how he worked with his clients through that experience. And so many of them loved that experience that when they upgraded to his more custom bespoke service, they were more inclined to follow his rules, follow his guidelines on how to work. They didn't overstep their boundaries. They weren't texting him on weekends or, making demands outside of scope, because that first very small, specific, contained offer for 8 weeks taught them how to be good clients. And so when they went into something that was more open-ended, they had been trained on how to actually work with him. So even his more custom and bespoke service that was on the back end of that engagement became more profitable by having that front end engagement first, compared to when he would just bring them into that open-ended retainer, which they're used to just steamrolling all of their agencies to get them do as much as they can for as little as possible. And what's funny is a year after we dialed in that first 8-week program, Tim went on to modify that custom retainer on the back end. And now his $100,000 a year custom agency retainer for a few people, but he added a $25K consulting version of that because again, he has a ton of expertise. So he was able to say, hey, I know you can't afford the $100,000 deal where we do all of these things, but for $25K a year, I can advise you and your team, and I can just give you all of our playbooks and SOPs to do what we would do anyway and advise as you execute it internally. And that way you get to use the staff you already have and you don't need to worry about spending $100K a year. That offer is actually what got him through the pandemic when so many clients were offloading their agencies to cut expenses, but they still needed to execute on the strategy. So they were able to buy into his consulting offer. So here's the key takeaway that I want you to have here. The most successful agencies in today's market and economy, and moving forward, in my opinion, are moving away from the traditional we do everything model towards something that is clearly defined and productized from a service or a consulting offer perspective. They are moving towards having multiple income streams that are focused on outcomes and results versus just a list of tasks and deliverables. They're incorporating shorter, more intensive engagements that get clients in the door at a profitable rate that can lead into the recurring revenue. They focus on value-based pricing based on the value of the outcomes. And it's really focused on that expertise-driven positioning, right? That's what's going to get people coming to you. So this shift is going to allow for you in your business to have higher profits, better client relationships because there's boundaries, more sustainable growth without requiring constant scaling of team size or complexity of operations. Now, if you want to build your agency around your expertise and your outcomes, not just deliverables and time and labor, then I want you to watch this video or the video linked up in the description below, because we're going to walk you through exactly how we structure our offers, how to move to selling your thinking instead of just doing, and how to have a more simple and profitable business that you love.